Okay, so it seems like you really can't scroll through any newsfeed right now without seeing the name Sean Diddy Combs.
It's everywhere, isn't it? P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Puff. He's had a few names.
Yeah, the list goes on. But this federal trial, it's really grabbed everyone's attention.
It absolutely has. And, for some pretty heavy reasons. So in this deep dive, we're going to try and unpack the core elements of this legal battle that's unfolding.
Right.
We've looked at news timelines, legal analyses, reports specifically on human trafficking, just to try and give you a clearer picture of what's actually going on.
And the charges themselves are incredibly serious. I mean, we're looking at racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking.
Transportation for prostitution, too. Yeah.
And the potential sentence, if he's convicted on everything, could be life. That's just stark.
It is. So our goal here really is to cut through some of the noise, the media frenzy, and focus on the important bits. What are the specific allegations? What's the legal basis?
And maybe what this tells us about, power and the difficulties in these kinds of sex trafficking cases.
Exactly. The complexities involved.
Okay, let's start with the charges themselves, because it's not just one thing, is it? It seems like quite a few different elements.
That's right. The federal indictment lays out several very significant felony counts. The big ones are that racketeering conspiracy charge, sex trafficking specifically by force, fraud, or coercion, and then transporting someone for prostitution.
And you mentioned it's not just about Combs the individual. There's this phrase being used, the Combs enterprise. What does that actually mean in legal terms?
So the prosecution is basically arguing that his different businesses, Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs Enterprises, Combs Global, they weren't just legitimate companies.
Okay.
They're alleging these businesses actually operated together as a criminal organization, the Combs Enterprise, they call it.
Right.
And the claim is that this enterprise was the way his alleged sexual desires were facilitated, and maybe more importantly, how illegal activities were hidden.
So like using the business structure as a cover.
Kind of, yeah. Like a pyramid scheme, but instead of, selling products, the allegation is these businesses were used to enable and cover up crimes, all directed by Combs.
And what sort of illegal activities are we talking about here within this alleged enterprise? It sounded like a pretty wide range.
It is. The list in the indictment is extensive and very serious. We're talking allegations of kidnapping, arson, even bribery of a witness, obstruction of justice, drug distribution, forced labor, sex trafficking itself, and that transportation for prostitution charge we mentioned. It's a lot.
And this wasn't just like a one-off thing. The timeline the prosecution is laying out seems pretty long.
Yeah, that racketeering charge specifically alleges these activities happened from at least 2004.
2004.
Right through 2024, 20 years. The sex trafficking and transportation charges, they peg those as starting a bit later, around 2009.
Still, that's a significant period. These are incredibly serious accusations. When we talk about sex trafficking under federal law, what's the specific definition we should have in mind?
Okay, so federally, it's defined by the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, the TVPA, from 2000.
Right.
Basically, it involves getting, keeping, leaving, or providing a person for a commercial sex act. But the key part is how it has to be induced by force, fraud, or coercion.
Okay, force, fraud, or coercion.
Yes. Or if the person involved is under 18, then the means don't even matter as much legally. It's trafficking. And it's important that the indictment here includes allegations involving both adults and, allegedly, minors sometimes.
So proving that force, fraud, or coercion, that seems like it would be the challenge.
Absolutely. Showing that someone's will was overcome by those methods is often central to proving a violation in court.
Now, a term that keeps coming up in reports, and it sounds like it's central to the prosecution's case, is freak-offs. Can you explain what these are supposed to be?
Yeah, the freak-offs, or FOs sometimes. They are definitely a key part of the prosecution's narrative. They're described as these drug-fueled sex parties lasting multiple days, involving prostitutes.
Multi-day events.
Right. And the prosecution alleges Combs organized and controlled them. The level of planning suggested, drugs, multiple people over days, implies something pretty organized, not spontaneous.
Which ties into the racketeering idea, maybe, like systemic.
Exactly. That it was part of a pattern and organized activity.
So what details have come out about what allegedly happened at these freak-offs?
Well, Cassie Ventura, who's a key witness and his former girlfriend, she testified they were deeply humiliating.
Right.
Her testimony reportedly included details about male escorts being involved, and even times when she apparently suffered physical injuries during these sessions.
That's disturbing.
And the prosecution claims victims were drugged, coerced into participating. Plus, when law enforcement searched properties, they reportedly found what they called freak-off supplies, apparently over 1,000 bottles of lubricant and baby oil.
1,000 bottles? Wow. Okay, that volume alone seems significant.
It suggests a certain scale, yeah.
Let's talk more about the key witnesses. Cassie Ventura, obviously, her testimony seems pivotal. What are the main things she's alleged?
Her testimony was apparently quite extensive over several days. She described years of alleged abuse, physical, emotional, and really intense control exerted by Combs.
Okay.
And crucially, she testified she was coerced into those freak-offs. She even said something striking that she'd give back the $20 million settlement she received.
Right, there was a settlement.
If it meant she could undo the trauma of those events. And beyond that, she made a very specific, very serious allegation of rape in August 2018.
Okay. Heady stuff. And she's not the only one who's come forward with testimony, right? Dawn Richard from Danity Kane.
Yes, Dawn Richard. Her testimony was also really impactful based on reports. She said she actually saw Combs physically assault Cassie back in 2009.
Witnessed it directly.
That's her testimony. She described him hitting Cassie on the head, then beating her while she was on the ground.
Jeez.
But what's particularly chilling is what she says happened after. She claims Combs threatened her and her bandmates, told them to keep quiet.
Threatened them? How?
She testified he explicitly said things like, people go missing if they talked. She said it made her genuinely fear for her life. And we should remember, Dawn Richard has also filed her own civil suit against Combs.
That alleged threat, people go missing, that really highlights the power dynamics potentially involved here and the intimidation factor.
Absolutely. It speaks volumes.
Are there other witnesses, other people whose accounts have been mentioned?
Yeah, the sources we looked at also mentioned Lil Rod Jones. He's made allegations about unwanted advances, being drugged, getting threats.
Okay.
And there's also Jane Doe, who came forward alleging she's drugged and gang raped way back in 2003.
So you have all these allegations, this testimony piling up. What's the defense doing? How are they pushing back against all this?
Well, the defense strategy seems to be focused largely on trying to paint the accusers as willing participants in Combs's lifestyle.
Okay, suggesting it was consensual.
Right. And also suggesting their motives are primarily financial, which, focusing on financial motivation is a fairly common defense tactic in these kinds of situations.
We saw hints of that during Cassie Ventura's cross-examination, didn't we?
Exactly. They questioned her directly about her motives, brought up that $20 million settlement, kind of implied she needed the money before she sued.
How did she respond to that?
She apparently pushed back hard, denied being strapped for cash, and repeated that point about trading the money to erase the freak-offs. The defense also used text messages, apparently sent between her and Combs, trying to show there were still consensual interactions even after times she alleged abuse had happened.
Trying to muddy the waters, essentially.
That appears to be the aim, yes.
Okay, beyond the witness accounts, what about other evidence? Are there key pieces that have been presented?
The big one, certainly the most talked about, is that 2016 surveillance video. It reportedly shows Combs physically assaulting Cassie Ventura in a hotel hallway.
That video caused a huge stir when it was released.
Understandably. It's powerful visual evidence. And then there's also testimony from a Homeland Security agent, Yasin Binda.
What did he testify about?
He detailed what was seized from Combs' hotel room during a search, substantial amounts of cash, drugs, and again, that baby oil.
Connecting back to the freak-off supplies idea.
Precisely.
Let's circle back to the witness intimidation aspect you mentioned with Dawn Richard. It sounds like those allegations were a major reason Combs was denied bail.
Yes, that was apparently a key factor. The court denied bail twice. Dawn Richard's testimony about being threatened after witnessing the alleged assault on Cassie was a prime example cited.
Right.
And there was another instance mentioned. Combs apparently contacted another former Danity Kane member, Kalana Harper, like 58 times right after Dawn Richard filed her lawsuit. The prosecution pointed to that as potential witness tampering.
So how does the federal bail system even work here? It's not just about having money, is it?
No, not at all. That's a really crucial point. The federal system, under the Bail Reform Act, mainly looks at two things. Is the defendant likely to flee before trial? And are they potential danger to the community if released?
Okay. Flight risk and danger.
Exactly. So in Combs' case, his significant wealth and having a private jet obviously played into the flight risk assessment.
Sure, that makes sense.
And then those allegations of witness tampering directly impact the danger to the community assessment, suggesting a risk of obstructing justice. That's why bail was denied.
This whole situation, it really feels like it plugs into a much larger conversation we're having in society about power, abuse, celebrity.
Right.
How does this case connect to other high-profile ones we've seen?
It's hard not to draw parallels, isn't it?
Yeah.
You think of cases like R. Kelly, or even going back further, maybe Mike Jeffries from Abercrombie and Fitch. These situations often seem to highlight how people with immense power, fame, and resources can allegedly exploit others.
Right.
And they also shine a light on the systems, the networks, the enablers, perhaps, that can sometimes protect powerful people for a long time, allegedly facilitating or covering up abuse. You often see patterns of alleged isolation and control.
Yeah. And prosecuting sex trafficking cases, just generally, what are the big challenges law enforcement and prosecutors face?
Oh, there are many significant hurdles. Proving that force, fraud, or coercion element we talked about, that could be incredibly tough.
Especially if it's psychological manipulation.
Exactly. Not always physical evidence. Then you have the trauma victims experience. That can make them very reluctant or even unable to cooperate fully with investigations. It's understandable.
Sure.
Plus, resource constraints for law enforcement. And the laws themselves are relatively new in the grand scheme of things. The main federal law is from 2000. All U.S. states didn't have specific trafficking laws until 2013.
That recent. Wow.
Yeah. There's a model often used now, the action, means, purpose, or AMP model, which helps identify trafficking by looking at the trafficker's actions. The means they use for control, like force, threats, debt, and the purpose, which is exploitation.
That's helpful context. Now, shifting focus just a bit, Sean Combs, he's been a huge figure for decades, his influence in music, business. Can we just briefly touch on that history and how this trial might just completely redefine his legacy?
Absolutely. I mean, his rise in the 90s with Bad Boy Records was meteoric. He fundamentally shaped hip-hop and pop music, built this huge empire: music, fashion, drinks, you name it.
A cultural force, really.
Undeniably.
Right.
But his career hasn't been without controversy before this. There was the nightclub shooting back in 1999, other legal issues over the years.
Right.
But this current trial, with allegations this severe, it undeniably threatens to completely overshadow everything else. It forces a major reevaluation, not just of him, but of celebrity culture, power, accountability, the whole conversation.
So, trying to pull all these threads together, what would you say are the key pieces of evidence or testimony that seem to corroborate, to support these very serious charges against him?
Well, when you put things side by side, you see several elements that seem to align. You have Cassie Ventura's detailed account of alleged coercion and abuse over years.
Okay.
You have that reported 2016 assault video providing visual evidence.
Right, the video.
Then Don Richards' account of witnessing abuse, and, crucially, the alleged threats afterward.
The intimidation piece?
Yes. And finally, the physical items sees the cash, drugs, the large quantity of lubricant and oil. Taken together, these pieces seem to build the prosecution's case for racketeering, trafficking, and transportation.
This has been a really thorough look at a very complex and, frankly, disturbing situation. As the trial goes on, what are the main takeaways you think people should keep in mind?
Well, first, just the sheer gravity of the allegations. It's immense. And it's vital to remember this is an ongoing trial. Things are still unfolding, so our understanding will evolve.
Yeah.
But what stands out right now is this alleged pattern of abuse of power, and also just how incredibly difficult it often is for people to seek justice in sex trafficking cases. Especially when the accused is someone with so much wealth and influence.
Yeah, the power imbalance is stark. And for anyone listening who might be affected by these issues or maybe wants to report something they suspect is human trafficking, where can they turn?
That's so important. Help is definitely available. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is a key resource. The number is 888-373-7888.
888-373-7888.
Yes. They offer confidential support, resources, and you could report tips there too.
Okay, good to know. Finally, this case really does make you think about that intersection: fame, power, accountability. What's one final thought you want to leave people mulling over?
Maybe just this question. How do we as a society get better at holding powerful people accountable? And what more can we do to make sure that anyone who's vulnerable feels safe enough, empowered enough to come forward and seek justice no matter who the accused might be?